Hello and welcome. In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into one of the most incredible processes in all of biology, human reproduction. We'll be following the NCERT curriculum step by step to understand the entire journey, from a single cell all the way to a new life.
So, let's start with the big question. How does new life actually begin? Well, humans are viviparous, which is just a fancy way of saying we give birth to live young. But this isn't just a single moment. It's a whole sequence of beautifully orchestrated events. We're going to follow this entire journey from how the very first cells are made to the 9 months of development that happen inside the womb.
Here's our roadmap for this deep dive. First, we'll look at the hardware, the male and female reproductive systems. Then, we'll see how the essential ingredients, the sperm and egg, are actually created. We'll spend some time on the monthly rhythm of the menstrual cycle, which really sets the stage. After that, we get to the main event, fertilization and the incredible 9-month journey of development, all leading up to childbirth and lactation. So, let's get started with the blueprint.
Okay, Section 1, the reproductive systems. Before we get into the how, we really need to understand the what. What are the parts involved? So let's take a look at the fundamental anatomy, the biological blueprint for creating life.
We'll kick things off with the male reproductive system, which you'll find in the pelvis region. It's made up of a bunch of interconnected parts. You've got the primary organs, the testes, and their main job is to produce sperm. But it's not just about making them. There's a whole network of accessory ducts and glands that help mature, store, and transport these cells. So let's zoom in on the factory itself, the testes. Now this is where things get really cool when we look at the microanatomy. The testes are housed in the scrotum, a pouch that has a very clever design. It keeps the testes about 2 to 2.5 degrees Celsius cooler than the rest of the body. And you might wonder why. Well, it's because making healthy sperm, a process called spermatogenesis, requires this slightly lower temperature. It's absolutely crucial. Now, inside each testis, you've got about 250 little compartments called testicular lobules, and inside those are the seminiferous tubules. These are the actual assembly lines for sperm. 2 types of cells here are super important. The Sertoli cells, which basically act as nannies, providing nutrition to the developing sperm cells. And then you have the Leydig cells, which hang out in the spaces outside the tubules and are responsible for producing the key male hormone, testosterone. So once the sperm are produced, they don't just sit around, they go on a pretty remarkable journey. Let's trace their path. They start in the seminiferous tubules, then move into a network called the rete testis. From there, they flow through the vasa efferentia and into the epididymis. Think of the epididymis like a boot camp, where the sperm mature and are stored. When the time is right, they travel up a long tube called the vas deferens, all the way into the abdomen. This tube then joins up with a duct from the seminal vesicle to form the ejaculatory duct, before finally emptying into the urethra, which is the final pathway out of the body. All right, let's switch gears and turn to the female reproductive system, also located in the pelvic region. This system has a dual purpose. Not only does it produce the egg, but it's also designed to protect and nurture a developing life for 9 full months. The primary organs here are the ovaries, and they're connected to a whole system of accessory organs like the oviducts, the uterus, the cervix, and the vagina. And what's interesting is that the female system also includes the mammary glands, which are built right in to provide nourishment after birth. So let's break down how all these parts work together. Let's get into the function of each key part. The ovaries, well, they have 2 main jobs. First, to produce the female gamete, the ovum, and second, to secrete those vital steroid hormones. The oviducts, you might know them as fallopian tubes, are where the magic of fertilization typically happens, in a specific area called the ampulla. At the end of the tubes, you have these finger-like things called fimbria, which help scoop up the egg after it's released from the ovary. That egg then travels to the uterus, or the womb. And the uterine wall is just this brilliant piece of engineering. It's got 3 layers. The outer perimetrium for protection, the middle myometrium, which is a thick, powerful muscle crucial for childbirth, and the inner endometrium. This inner layer is super dynamic. It's the one that thickens up and then sheds every month during the menstrual cycle. Section 2, gametogenesis. So, we've covered the hardware. Now, let's look at how the essential ingredients, the reproductive cells themselves, are actually created. This process has a name, gametogenesis. This slide does a great job of showing the 2 very different ways gametes are made. On the left, you see spermatogenesis, the creation of sperm. This process kicks off at puberty and just keeps going, producing millions and millions of sperm. One single cell, a primary spermatocyte, goes through meiosis, that special cell division that cuts the chromosome number in half, and you end up with 4 equal little spermatids that mature into sperm. Now, on the right, you have oogenesis, egg formation, and it is totally different. This process actually starts when a female is just a fetus in her mother's womb. And look at the cell divisions, they're unequal. You get one big ovum, which hogs all the nutrient-rich cytoplasm, and a few tiny, non-functional polar bodies. And there's a good reason for this. It makes sure the future zygote has plenty of resources to get started.
Let's zoom right in on the final product of spermatogenesis, the sperm cell or spermatozoan. It's really a marvel of tiny engineering. The head contains the genetic payload, half the DNA needed for a new person. At its very tip is the acrosome, which is like a little cap packed with enzymes designed to break through the egg's outer layers. Then you have the middle piece. That's the engine room. It's jam-packed with mitochondria that generate all the energy needed to power the tail, which acts like a propeller, pushing the sperm along on its long journey.
Section 3. The menstrual cycle. This brings us to what is arguably one of the most important topics in this whole chapter. The menstrual cycle is the reproductive cycle you see in humans and other female primates, and it's this incredibly complex, beautiful dance of hormones that prepares the body for a potential pregnancy month after month. Honestly, this graph is the key to understanding the entire menstrual cycle. It shows you the levels of 4 key hormones over a typical 28-day cycle. The top 2, FSH and LH, are coming from the pituitary gland in the brain. The bottom 2, estrogen and progesterone, are produced by the ovaries. Just look at how their levels rise and fall in this perfectly coordinated dance. They all influence each other. This hormonal orchestra is what drives every single change in both the ovaries, what we call the ovarian cycle, and in the lining of the uterus, the uterine cycle. Let's break it down even further.
Okay, let's unpack that graph into 4 clear phases. The cycle kicks off with the menstrual phase, which lasts about 3 to 5 days. This is when the uterine lining, the endometrium, is shed because pregnancy didn't happen. Then comes the follicular phase. During this time, FSH and LH from the brain tell the follicles in the ovary to start growing. As they grow, these follicles pump out estrogen, which in turn tells the uterine lining to start rebuilding itself. Then around day 14, we get to the main event, a massive spike in LH, what we call the LH surge. This surge is the trigger for ovulation, the release of the mature egg. That's the ovulatory phase. And finally, we enter the luteal phase. The follicle that was left behind transforms into something called the corpus luteum. It's like a temporary little gland that produces a ton of progesterone, which makes the uterus even more ready for a potential pregnancy.
So, the egg has been released, the uterine lining is ready, the stage is set for the next huge event. This section is all about that moment when the gametes meet and a new life begins. This slide maps out the incredible first week of life. It's an amazing journey. After insemination, millions of sperm travel toward the fallopian tube. If they find an ovum in that ampullary region, fertilization can happen, creating one single diploid cell called a zygote. As this brand new zygote starts its trip toward the uterus, it begins dividing like crazy in a process called cleavage. The new cells are called blastomeres. Soon, it becomes a solid little ball of 8 to 16 cells called a morula. It keeps dividing and developing into a hollow structure called a blastocyst. And finally, this blastocyst finds its home and embeds itself into the wall of the uterus. That event, implantation, is what officially marks the beginning of pregnancy.
Okay, this brings us to a really important question, one that comes straight from your textbook. In some societies, women are wrongly blamed for the sex of their child. Why is that scientifically completely incorrect? Just take a second to think about it. The answer is all in the sex chromosomes. A female produces eggs, or ova, and every single one of them carries an X chromosome. A male, on the other hand, produces 2 types of sperm. About half carry an X chromosome, and the other half carry a Y chromosome. So the sex of the baby is determined entirely by which type of sperm, an X or a Y, fertilizes the egg. If an X sperm gets there first, the baby is XX, a female. If a Y sperm wins the race, the baby is XY, a male. The determining factor always comes from the father.
Once implantation is successful, we officially enter the period of gestation, or pregnancy. This is the 9-month period of development, a truly amazing process of biological construction. After implantation, the body builds this incredible temporary organ, the placenta. It serves as the all-important connection between the developing fetus and the mother. You can think of it as a lifeline. Through the umbilical cord, the placenta supplies oxygen and all the necessary nutrients to the fetus, and at the same time, it removes waste products like carbon dioxide. But that's not all. It's also a powerful hormone factory, producing hormones like HCG, that's human chorionic gonadotropin, the hormone that pregnancy tests detect, and HPL, human placental lactogen, which are both essential for maintaining the pregnancy.
The 9 months of gestation are just a period of mind-blowing transformation. Let's hit the major milestones. By the end of just the first month, the embryo's heart is already formed and beating. How incredible is that? By the end of the second month, the fetus has limbs and digits. By the end of the first trimester, that's about 12 weeks, most of the major organ systems are already in place. During the 5th month, the mother can feel the first movements and hair starts to appear on the head. By the end of the second trimester, the body is covered with fine hair and the eyelids separate. And finally, by the end of 9 months, the fetus is fully developed and ready for the outside world.
And that brings us to the final chapter of this incredible story, the end of pregnancy with childbirth, which is called parturition, and then the nourishment that follows, through lactation.
So how does childbirth, or parturition, actually get started? Well, it's driven by this really cool neuroendocrine mechanism. It all begins with signals from the fully developed fetus and the placenta. These signals cause mild contractions in the uterus, and this is known as the fetal ejection reflex. This reflex then sends a message to the mother's pituitary gland, telling it to release the hormone oxytocin. Oxytocin is the key player here. It acts on the uterine muscle, the myometrium, and makes the contractions much stronger. And this is where it gets interesting. This creates a powerful positive feedback loop. The stronger contractions stimulate the release of more oxytocin, which leads to even stronger contractions, and this cycle just keeps amplifying itself until the baby is delivered.
All right, time for a quick lightning round. These are the absolute must-know terms from this chapter, especially for your exams. Gametogenesis, that's the creation of sperm and eggs. The LH surge, remember, that's the big hormone spike that triggers ovulation. Implantation, the moment the blastocyst burrows into the uterine wall. The placenta, the critical lifeline between mother and fetus. Parturition, the whole process of childbirth, kicked off by that fetal ejection reflex. And finally, lactation, milk production, especially that first milk, colostrum, which is packed with antibodies. If you know these, you're in great shape.
And with that, we've completed our journey through human reproduction. We've seen how it all starts with tiny microscopic cells and unfolds into this 9-month symphony of hormones and development, all culminating in a new life. You know, understanding this process, from the hormones to the mechanics of birth, is about so much more than just biology. It really helps us understand the amazing, intricate process that connects every single one of us. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.